Albo's reckless and draconian misinformation legislation completely undermines itself. I was really shocked by this particular article because it makes the point as to the motive behind this bill. What is this bill going to do? It's essentially going to censor people online. It's going to censor the non-establishment media sources, the non-corporate media sources that aren't a part of the mainstream. So that includes the Light Australian newspaper, that includes podcasts like this, it includes the work that we do under Turning Point Australia for elections. Crikey describes this reaction from the government as the government being incensed by misinformation since it lost the Voice referendum, convinced that its opponents were being misleading. And they also make the point that the government is trying to launder the radicalism of this legislation through the complexities of delegation and regulatory outsourcing, giving the bureaucrats the power to actually get across this. Stephen, welcome to the show. What was your reaction? You've been tracking this for a while. I mean, anyone that has any interest in, and they're outside the establishment, has been tracking this misinformation bill. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing transpire with this?
Oh, it's an absolute, just a lot of bullshit. Pretty much whenever anyone in society now says something, it doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong, the government is going to say, no, you're wrong. You know, I could go out, and I think we had this conversation before the show, that I could go out and say, the sky is blue. It's a beautiful day out there. But no, if the government wants to, it says, no, it's not. It's purple, and it's a shit day, right? And because you've said that, they can do it. It's a propaganda unit. That's what Albo is creating here. And look, by the way, people, the Liberals support this as well, right? So both the majors support the propaganda unit that this will create. And this is an absolute Orwellian thing. I always thought when I read that book, 1984, that it was a bit of fiction and it was something that would never happen. And I look outside the door now, and all I see is everything in that book is coming true. It's mate, I don't recognise the Western cultures anymore. And I say the entire Western world. Whatever we used to say about Russia and China and North Korea and Venezuela and Cuba and all these places, it's now true in our own backyard. And we've got to stop somehow, get together and stop this. Because the people out there, we've been saying it, a lot of us that are outside the establishment now and who used to be inside the establishment are all saying the same thing. You know, they've gone too far. They don't care about the people. Right? All they care about is making sure that they retain power and stay in power. And that's what all this is about. There's nothing more than making sure Albo and all his cronies can stay in power.
Yeah. Shaquille, what were your initial thoughts before we get into some of the details of the bill?
You know, I'm really quite tired of this. We've already said very clearly we don't want it. The UK is trying to do the same thing with Keir Starmer. The US tried to do it through Homeland Security. We don't want this. Now, when Senator Conroy was around and he had the metadata rules, nobody in Australia wanted that, and they passed it anyway. So do me a favour, government, all sides. If you're going to carry on like this, can you at least be honest that we don't actually have a representative democracy? Because you're not representing us at all. Australians are clearly saying, if this was a referendum on do we want government to do this, I think that you would have, maybe not Canberra, like The Voice, but you'd have universal support across this country. I reckon you'd have 85% of people that would say absolutely not. So, I'm really tired of parties getting into government and then acting like they have a mandate to do something that they do not have a mandate to do. It's not fair. It's not right. And we shouldn't put up with it. Now, I don't know how to fix that, but we shouldn't have to put up with this. Yeah, this is our country. It's not theirs.
100%.
Well, it even says in our Constitution, we are supposed to be governed by the majority.
Yep.
Right? When was the last time government actually did something for the majority of Australians? I can't remember it. Right? Even towards the end of John Howard's term, right, in 2006-07, then there was a tide of change of doing stuff to keep people in power. We've got to get back to making sure that whatever the government does is it's doing it for the majority of the people.
Yeah.
And a majority isn't getting together with your mates in the Greens and your lefty mates in the Liberal Party and Pocock and silly bloody flaming Lambie, right? And just passing a bill. That's passing a bill for the minority. Because as far as I'm concerned, Lambie, Pocock, all the independents are minorities.
Well, I will say this.
Yeah.
You know, there's not going to be any limit, and they're doing it by stealth as well, by having corporations do it on their behalf. If you're going after Facebook and all that, but I'll let you get into that in a minute. But you know, look, I know I differ from my conservative friends on lots of different points. I'm not a conservative. I'm certainly not a lefty, but I've always been a Republican. I think I always will be a Republican. However, I think even those people that love the monarchy in this country would acknowledge that we don't want to have a system of government that rules over us.
No.
We're supposed to have a system of government. The government's supposed to be our servant, not the other way around. And so when the government is acting like this, especially when it's the Labor Party, who are supposed to be Republicans too, if they're going to carry on like this, imagine if we became a republic and these people were in charge with absolutely no guardrails at all. That really worries me.
Well, in theory, we have a Republican system of government because we elect people to represent us. We don't have direct democracy, right? There's very few countries around the world that actually has direct democracy. So our form of government is a Republican style where we elect someone, they go, but they're supposed to do what they were elected to do.
Well, a Republican style of government should have a constitution which allows individuals to limit the power of government over them, which we kind of had under the Magna Carta, and that's unclear now whether that stuff applies to us. But you're right. We should have this. However, if you're a Labor Party voter, your elected representative, your local member, doesn't actually represent you at all. No. The person, the place that I stay in Sydney at the moment, the member for that area is Dr. Mike Freeman. I think is a great guy. I've met him. I've met his son. I think he's very dedicated. However, if everybody in that area that he represents, MacArthur, actually wants him to do one thing, he doesn't have a choice because he can't cross the floor.
No.
So the Labor Party doesn't even pretend to represent their local constituents.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Let's get into the details of the bill, because you make a great point, both of you. The idea that the government is basically passing the buck. They're basically saying, no, it's not our fault. You know, the government's trying to launder this radicalism of the bill through the complexities of delegation and regulatory outsourcing. So which delegation is it? It's ACMA. It's the Australian Communications and Media Authority. And basically ACMA is going to be the one that's sort of the neutral arbiter. Now, you guys know that how many bureaucrats dwell in Canberra. You know that Canberra was the only place that voted yes to the voice in terms of a state or a territory. Even the Northern Territory voted against the voice. And that's where these people are coming from. That's where they're coming from. It's the highest earning area in the country. So what sort of powers, what sort of things are brought into question? These are some various tweets from the senators that are coming up. The misinformation bill will actually go after people that even attack the public confidence in the banking system or financial markets. This is from Senator Rennick. He said, fancy trying to censor criticism of the banking system and the financial markets. That's so what's so concerning is how on earth did that clause even get in the bill? Well, maybe it's because the banks are donating to some of these members of parliament, right? And that's exactly what is mentioned in this particular bill. If you look at Part F in this particular thing, in the actual bill in the details, it says harm is defined as imminent harm to the Australian economy, including harm to public confidence in the banking system of financial markets. Senator Matt Canavan made the point, well, I mean, if you're going to do that with these laws, you know, public confidence, under these laws, those who called out the recklessness of mortgage-backed securities before the global financial crisis would have been censored, and they were right. And that's the point. And before I get you guys to weigh on this, the other aspect is medical misinformation, which even now I can't talk about on YouTube right on this live stream because we'll be nuked about the jabs and everything. But even with this particular bill in its current form, if this passes, if you even attack the Australian health approach during COVID, or you vilify the lockdowns, or you criticise the jab rollout or whatever, you're gone. You're gone. That's it. So if you're a social media provider, you could be fined 5% of your annual revenue. Revenue, not profit. Revenue. All the money that comes in. And that also pertains to anyone that's outside a government institution or anyone that's outside a mainstream professional corporate newspaper or TV outlet. So stuff like us, stuff like the Light Australian newspaper, gone. We're subject to it. We're subject to 5% of our revenue if we're not properly policing misinformation properly. That's it. So they're clearly interfering in the public process. And the last thing I'll say on this is harm also to the operation or integrity of a commonwealth, state, territory, or local government electoral or referendum process. And that goes back to the point that was being made in the article that they're basically trying to, this is essentially revenge from the government on the voice referendum. But gents, what were your opinions on the inclusions, the attack on protecting the banking system and the financial institutions?
Well, you're protecting the people that are feeding the politicians, aren't you? And that's what basically that's all about. The other problem is, and when you brought it up, is that ACMA is based, inside the swamp, right? The swarm of people down there, they're never ever going to go against their masters, right? Because they fear for their job. A lot of these people have jobs down there that are high paying, have all the extra perks, but if they were to try and get a job in the real world, they'd be, in a way lower position without the authority. So it's self-interest now. So these people are going to go along with these bills. They're going to curtail our freedoms and what we can and can't do in a so-called free society because of their personal interest of keeping their job. So ACMA is now going to become basically a quasi-police force.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's insane, isn't it? I mean, the idea that, you can't criticise these banking institutions, I mean, isn't this the monopoly or oligopoly, whatever the right word is, fighting back against the up-and-coming guys? I mean, if you start a financial institution or if you're, an up-and-coming newspaper and you're trying to criticise the big guys, this is like some kind of investment or donation in kind to these entities. Yeah. This is the establishment, stopping the little guys from coming up.
100%. It's going to stifle anyone wanting to start something a bit radical out there and a bit forward-thinking and a bit free-thinking and all that sort of stuff. Because to create disruption in an industry, you need to criticise the industry that is currently there. That's what disruption is.
That's right.
So we're now going to
Video Easy.
Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Right?
Netflix comes in
and eats all their lunch.
Yeah.
So are we going to see all innovation in tech, especially in fintech and all that sort of stuff, get stifled because of these laws?
Yeah. And also, what gives them the right? I mean, you guys are international guys. This is like, I'm the baby here. I do a bit of reading and whatever, but you guys have seen the world. I've only been out of school for 7-8 years. It's funny, isn't it? I make you feel old when I say that, don't I? But when you look at this, what gives an Australian government, one of over 200 governments around the world, the right to charge any organisation 5% of their revenue? I mean, it's a shakedown.
Especially the global revenue. That sounds crazy. But look, you briefly mentioned about the vaccinations before. I appear on a different podcast that is mostly an American show, and I asked a question. So all I did, I just asked a question, and I said, when they say that we're supposed to listen to health advice given to us, otherwise you get nuked off these platforms, what happens if you're an Australian or a Canadian, where you've got state health ministers telling you something that's a little bit different to what the federal government's saying, and they're saying something completely different in relation to AstraZeneca to what the Americans are saying? Now, the Canadians were told that they could have a Pfizer, then a Moderna, only to find that when they went to the United States and went on a cruise, that the cruise line said, no, you're not vaccinated by our private company's policy. Yeah. So, of course, I sat here in Australia and went, well, I didn't really want to have the vaccination, but I had to because I had a sick relative in New Zealand. I didn't want to miss seeing her. But I'm sitting there going, if I'm going to have to pick one, which one should I pick? I thought that was a reasonable question, isn't it? Bang, nuked. So you couldn't even ask a question. But more to the point about this, let's say I assume that everyone here doesn't believe in the flat Earth theory, right? but it's a fun theory sometimes. Like I've watched a few of these documentaries on what these guys believe, and they're trying to measure the curve and stuff like that. And then somebody will create a picture, and like, you know, the ocean is like falling off the side. Like, cool. Can't I listen to that? Can't I hear that? Or do I need government to tell me at 40 what is good for me? I don't think I need government to do that.
No.
But what I will say about the international stuff. So you have to remind me because I'm a bit rusty on this now, but the great Doc Everett, great Labor person, who was pivotal in creating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at the United Nations, which Australia didn't really implement the way that other nations did, but we won't go into that. Articles 18, 19, 20, I think they are, has to do with freedom of expression, free speech, etc. Like, we have fought, not us personally, but generations before us have fought really hard for the idea that you've got the freedom to be able to express whatever view you have without any interference from government. This is I mean, the US Bill of Rights, this is the fundamental first right that you've got is freedom of speech. It doesn't matter whether what you're saying is true or not. It really shouldn't. And who's going to be the arbiter of it? You made the comment before about it being a nice day outside. Now, you might go outside and see it's a beautiful day, and I might go out there and say it's blisteringly bloody hot. Yeah. So should we get government to come in and then decide, well, you said it was a good day, I said it was too hot. They're going to decide what the exact, preferred temperature of most human beings is, and then they're going to say which one of us is telling the truth. Where's this going to end? Yeah. The reality is I'm obviously using some silly examples, but if you've got criticism of government and you don't feel as though you can express it, that's a problem. But the real issue is how they're going to enforce this. Because what ACMA's going to do is it's going to essentially be threatening, holding something over the big tech companies and saying, well, we're not going to stop those people from saying something, but we're going to require you to do it. And what are they going to do? They're going to do what everybody does when a regulator's breathing down your neck. You overcompensate, you overdo it, you censor too much. The United States has just been through this. So I just think it's such a bad idea. And again, it doesn't have the support of the majority of the people. This is a disgrace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the idea that, an international organisation can just be dobbed 5% of the revenue is nuts. I mean, any dictator could do that. It's like, what's the recourse? Okay, what if they keep saying no? Are you going to kick them out of the country? I don't think our governments have thought this through.
Well, how are they actually going to enforce it? Right? Okay, I'll go to Twitter, Elon Musk. Okay, here you go, 5% of your global revenue, you got to pay us. Well, Elon's going to turn around and say, well, get a judgment against the corporation that owns this for a start, right? So it's a US, so he's got to try and get a US judgment against it. These laws aren't in the US at the moment.
Yeah.
Right? Yet. They are coming in. So what Elon does is he moves Twitter to a country that respects free speech and the rights of a corporation, in a quasi offshore jurisdiction.
Oh yeah, but then the powerful nations will just turn around and put sanctions on them. But at the moment, you've got 30% of the world's economy under sanctions. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But sanctions don't work. We all know sanctions don't work. So wherever you put sanctions, makes them richer, more powerful, and they internalise how they're doing. So all the government's going to do is make us poorer, us worse off, and all these companies are going to go to jurisdictions that are going to support them. And look, if I was a small Caribbean island nation, I'd be going, hey, Mr. Twitter, come and headquarter here. Bring 1,000 staff.
But this is the reason, not this specifically, but this kind of over-regulation is the reason I left Australia in the first place. Yeah. And I love this country, I really do. I love the people in it. I love Sydney. I've always loved Sydney. I was born in Perth, but I absolutely adore Sydney. It's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful city. And Australians are just wonderful people. Yeah. But we're run by absolute... I'm trying to think of something that's not a swear word. I'll just leave it at that.
but the other, and you're exactly right. Everywhere I've been around the world, and I've done business all over the world, and advised families and corporations around the world, and the same thing keeps coming up. Oh, you're from Australia? Where's that? Oh, your politicians were trying to do this. We're a laughing stock on the world stage.
Matt Walsh but he's been saying it for a while, but he's just said it again recently. And I was sitting here going, well, the UK is probably the laughing stock. But no, we look at some of our rules, and I'm sitting there recently going, Is New Zealand actually to the right of us all of a sudden?
Exactly.
Like, what's going on?
And the other thing is, if you look at us, like GDP in the world, right? We're one. Let's round it to 1% of the world. If we take mining out, we're probably negative. But we're 1% of the world's GDP, 1.2% of the world's GDP, which means there is 98.8% of the world's GDP outside of Australia.
Yeah.
Right? 30% in America, 30% in Asia, China reason. So if you're a major corporation and you're looking at, we're going to talk about the population. So there's 27 million people or something in Australia now. 27 million people, 1% of the world's GDP. You know what? Stuff it.
You're not going to risk 5% of your revenue
I'm not going to
for 1.5% potentially.
Exactly. So, well, it's actually less than that. It's going to be like 40% of one. So you're talking a rounding error in economics.
But that's why...
Right. So why would you risk it? You just go, stuff Australia. So we're going to be worse off.
Yeah. And Twitter's killing it. I mean, ever since they've got them going hard, it's the #1 downloaded app. I mean, it's doing very well.
That's why, if you remember, I rang you when Australia said, "Oh, we're also going to sanction Russia."
Yeah.
And I was like, do we do much trade with Russia? And then the news, the legacy media actually brought it up and said, oh, yeah, we do. We do 0.0001%. And the ABS or somebody said that's statistically indistinguishable from zero.
Yeah.
So, like, Australia jumps on that, and Vladimir Putin's there going, oh, no.
Shaking.
Oh, terrible. We've lost our trade with Australia.
Yeah, shaking. And what was it? It was like irrelevant stuff like barley and fertilizer, stuff we provide ourselves. Not the fertilizer so much, but barley. And it's like, we're a big exporter of that too.
Yeah.
It's so confusing. I don't know. Like, and the idea that they were then justifying the whole, the increase in petrol costs and the cost of living because of the Russia war in early 2022.
Yeah.
I mean,
don't get me started on fuel.
Yeah.
My God.
We'll talk about defence in a bit because we do need to talk about our reserves. But talk about misinformation. I will be doing a video every day on this because just to close this topic off, it's crazy. I will be doing something on every day to inform you guys about different elements to this bill. It's a 76-page bill, not very long, to be honest. But I put a video out today, and I just wanted to be clear about something because there's been some misinformation going out from online personality that has actually misquoted me. They said Joel said the bill's going to pass next week. That's not correct. If you look at the video, if you look at the transcript of what I actually said, the bill has submissions open now. That closes on Monday, the 30th of September. In fact, I put a countdown of when submissions close on my Instagram story, if you can watch that if you want. And it actually says, 5 days left, that's when submissions close. After that, this bill may not be passed till early to mid-October, maybe late October, because the Senate doesn't actually return to sit until the 8th of October. I've been talking to Senator Malcolm Roberts and a bunch of the other senators. They are deploying all the stops to stop this damn thing. And they get it. They get it. Where things stand right now is we've received over 10,000 signatures to our petition, thanks to you guys sharing that video. I only posted it 7 hours ago. From you guys sharing it out there, getting the word out, signing that petition. If you want to go above and beyond, share the video, go make a personal submission as well through the official website. But if you're happy with how I'm articulating my opposition to it as a part of the Light Australian newspaper, which has 200,000 prints, or the ARC podcast, which gets 1 million views every week from all the clips, or the Turning Point Australia stuff we do with the elections as a third-party campaigner. If you want to add your name to those petitions, head to tpaust.com.au. We've got a very simple sheet there. We can just add your name, your email, your postcode. And if you want to subscribe, there's an option to tick if you want to subscribe to our emails. But we've got to defeat this thing. And I do have a bit of encouraging news for you guys on this, an update. Andrew Clennell yesterday was making the point on Sky News that he doesn't think this thing's going to pass because the Greens and the crossbench are currently at crossroads with Labor for other reasons. But I am not going to rest on my laurels. This is too dangerous. The idea that I could be held liable as a director for the Light Australian newspaper and we could be charged 5% of our revenue. This is a volunteer funded and run entity. and they're trying to shut us down, but they want to protect the big corporates, the Australian newspaper and all of them who are exempt, all the government institutions. This is BS, and it must be stopped. I will not rest on my laurels on this until it's dead, like what we did in April, like what we did a year ago when we sent 25,000 submit. Do you remember that? In October last year, when I went away for a year, I said the reason the bill died was because you guys submitted 25,000 submissions to them, and it fell over because of the religious element of it as well. There was a lack of protections. They never fixed those protections. So I've got more information on that. I could talk about this forever, but I need to make some more videos for you guys to see that. But this makes me incredibly homicidal, which is why I've given you the disclaimer about swearing on this particular podcast. But moving forward, less from me, more from you guys. What do you want to say?
Before you get off this topic, just a couple of other things I just want to just say. When you had the legislation, I don't know if you can bring it back up on the screen.
Course, absolutely.
Because I'm actually surprised that the left isn't up against this.
Well,
it does worry me though that the scariest thing that you said is, well, the Greens aren't going to support it, so therefore it might not pass. I'm like, oh, thank heaven the Greens are here to protect us. My goodness.
But the reason the Greens won't support it, and this is why I believe the Greens won't support it, is because it opens them up to be censored. Mm-hmm. Because what happens here is this is a really, 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 really fucking bad tool for political censorship. Mm-hmm. Right? Xi Jinping will be sitting there at the moment going, fuck, I need to get this policy in place, right?
Yeah.
He'd be sitting there going, thanks, Albo. We'll put this around our own parliament.
I'll have one of those.
I'll have one of those.
I'll have what he's having.
Well, actually, look, I don't want to be conspiratorial, right? That's Joel's job.
Yeah, that's right. But all my conspiracies have come true, mate.
But maybe this is the plan, right? Because what we're doing is actually worse, in my opinion, than what they've done in China. What's being proposed here.
Yeah.
But if you just bring up that legislation again,
I think
it's
the definition of harm, was it?
Yeah, I can't read.
Or was it 15? I can zoom in.
Yes, if you can zoom in,
please. It was 15F, I think you're talking about.
Is it 15 you're talking about, or was it serious harm?
Go up. Oh no, sorry, no, you're right. Just go down. So B, C it was. So vilification of a group in Australia society, distinguished by race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status, disability, ethnicity, blah blah blah. Okay, now we are currently experiencing a flux of, it's in flux what gender is. Now, I think all of us know what the difference is between a man and a woman. Some people, for some reason, don't. They say that gender and sex are two different things. I don't agree, but that's fine. You can believe whatever you want to believe. That's my view on it, right? Now, when this was first suggested, the left who supports this, when they first suggested this, wouldn't that have also been something that would have just been censored?
100%.
Now, the left has got all sorts of ideas. Occasionally they have a good one, but they're never going to be able to get it out because they're not going to be in power forever. And then the Conservative government will come in and censor everything the left does. It's insanity. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And then when it comes to religion. So, okay, who is correct between the Catholics and the Protestants? Are we going to censor one or the other? Like, who's correct between the Muslims and the Jewish people? Which is an issue at the moment in Palestine and Israel, but generally they've gotten along before. Who's going to be correct between all these different religious groups?
Yeah.
Or does government come in and say, well, we're going to assess who's correct and who's not?
Yeah, and the video this morning, I talked about this, and this is why, guys, I'm going to try and limit the amount I'm talking on this because I'm making a lot of video content on this. This morning, I put a video out, 100,000 viewers. I mentioned the point. This thing is like the One Ring. The One Ring that we see in the Lord of the Rings.
Well, yeah.
It doesn't matter who's wielding it. It's going to destroy the person and it'll destroy everyone. And the problem we've got with this particular legislation is, and this is what I've given to the Light Australia management team, where they're going through all of our articles and working out which ones are violations, basically. But you could be in violation for financial reasons. If you're sowing doubt in the minds and the confidence of financial institutions in the banking system, public confidence, who defines that? So if I have an article, and there are 2 front-page articles we have of, bringing back cash, how you can't, Big Brother's watching your transactions and all of that, because it's becoming even more tighter with regards to those constraints and how much money you can get out of the bank. That is a violation. It's public confidence. The idea that, any idea that if you do a run on the banks won't have enough money, public confidence, bam, you're gone. That's how broad the definition is. That's just one thing. Climate change, whether you're on the right or the left, depending who's holding this ring of Mordor, they will police you. If you're on the left and you're locking down and you're threatening public infrastructure like they did in Sydney, blocking Sydney Harbour Bridge, getting on an abseiling rope and jumping down, this will stop you, Greens. This will stop you, Antifa. And if you're on the right, so you've got big corporates that are actually funding these government parties, Labor, Liberal, and they're censoring you on the left, but also on the right. If the left wing are actually have this ring of Mordor and they're censoring accurate information, but what they just classify as disinformation or misinformation,
maligned information.
Maligned information. I think that's an Aussie creation. That word.
Yeah.
They can actually censor you.
That's what is in the thing.
In the bill. Yeah.
So it can be information that is true, but against the government's narrative.
Right.
So I trade the markets a lot. That's how I make, that's how I make most of my money. And I do very well trade the big four banks of Australia. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not going to name them for the purposes of what I want to say right now. But if we were talking and I said, look, I think that ABC Bank is going to perform better than XYZ Bank for the following reasons. That's normal trading strategies. That's normally what strategists do when they sit down and talk.
It's called arbitrage.
Right? Well, it's spread trading between the two, right?
Yeah.
So, now that wouldn't be okay. Bank West decides to go cashless. We're not allowed to criticise that. Westpac, for example, if you have a look at their market cap, has fallen quite precipitously. They're no longer on market cap, the second biggest bank in Australia. And look, I know that part of the reason why was because of their interest rate exposure. But I think that Westpac will bounce back. I'm just not sure they'll bounce back today. It might take a while. So what if this passes? I can't say that anymore.
Yeah,
right. I mean it's just ludicrous. It's either poorly thought out or they've thought about it really, really well. And I actually think that they thought about it really, really well, because what they do with regulations is they create it in such a convoluted way you can't comply, and so they always have the right to look at you, and they'll always find something you've done wrong.
So this bill will also destroy footy season. Because no longer can you go out and say Collingwood supporters are fools, right? Or you can't go out and...
Or the Brisbane Lions are going to lose to the Sydney Swans next week.
Oh, well, yeah, who cares about aerial ping pong? But come and play a real game. But you can't criticise, in theory, in the media, because someone could take offence to it.
Exactly, and that's the big thing. You've got financial institutions, you've got climate change, which is left or right, depending on who's holding it. Medical, which could be anything. I mean, even that's often a left-wing thing as well. I mean, maybe, the right-wingers start censoring the topic of abortion. If you're on the left and you want abortion, maybe they could censor you. And on top of that, the government infrastructure, that attacks the left. That attacks the left-wing thing as well. But also in the right wing, we could be talking about 5G, 15-minute cities, digital ID, all that sort of infrastructure.
Great.
And the last thing I'll say is religious freedom. Guys, do you have any idea how many times the Christian Bible, the Old Testament, for the Jews, and also the Quran for the Muslims, I'm in the process of tabbing it, how many times it violates point 14C. I mean, 14C, vilification of a group in Australia society distinguished by race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status, disability, national or ethnic origin, vilification of an individual based on a belief that the individual is a member of such a group. You've got national and you've got race. Straight away, depending on who's holding this damn ring, it doesn't matter which way you fall on Israel-Palestine, you could be censored. It doesn't matter. So there's protests you saw in Melbourne of the left-wingers going out and having those clashes with police. Censored. You can't distribute the protest sign to get everyone out. Similarly, if you're on the Israel or Palestine...
Well, we can't think on Tasmanians and New Zealanders anymore.
But you know what? I don't even think this will play out like this, because Conservatives are so cowardly when it comes to this stuff. It's their fault that this has been allowed to get so bad. And what happens is, out of the three of us that are on here right now, I can say anything I want about Stephen, right? Because Stephen's a white Christian, right? but you say one thing about me and I'm on the left and I'm a person of colour. Oh, no, it's not allowed. And that's what's going to happen with this.
Yeah.
If they pass this, you'll get to continue to see people vilifying the majority of Australians for their religion and for their skin colour because they're white and they're Christian, and everyone else, so what you like.
This is just the next step in the segregation of society. Because if you have a look through history, and it's in the Bible and the Quran and the Torah, it's in everything. Separate the people, they're easier to control.
That's right. That's right.
And this is all about that, keeping the people separated, dumb and happy, so they don't rise up against their masters.
Yeah, but
Keep them a slave.
they're keeping us separated, dumb and unhappy. Or maybe it's just us that are unhappy. I don't know. Maybe everyone else is sitting there going, yes, more government control. That's what I need in my life. I want government to come in.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's my problem.
Yeah, literally. Maybe that is your problem, more government. And that's the problem. These things did come under the Liberals. The whole idea, the E-Safety Commission was appointed by the Liberals. It was actually under ScoMo that this happened, that the E-Karen was appointed, the E-Commissar, and it was under the guise of protecting kids online. Now, we don't make rules based on the exception. We don't make rules based on the exception. The idea that we're going to make rules based on one person out of a million that has a third leg or something, whatever it is. You don't make legislation on that basis. And that's what they're doing essentially with this. I do have to make just a point to be absolutely crystal clear on this. If you go to the communication legislation, and the only reason I'm bringing this up is because someone's made a video about me, misinformation, on what I said. I didn't say the bill could be passed next week. It can't be passed next week. Submissions close next week. However, I did speculate and make the point that this might be happening because they're trying to do some kind of October surprise, or they're trying to even censor anything to do with what we saw in 2020, where there was a lot of information about the votes and how the swing states were in. Yep. It became election quarter, because there was a lot of counting and the counting was very slow. So if you actually go to the communication website, which I encourage you to do, on the 19th of September, the Senate referred they will refer the provisions or the communications legislation amendment, the misinformation bill that is, to the legislation committee for report by the 25th of November. So this couldn't really be passed until after the 25th of November. However, as I mentioned in the video, submissions close on Monday next week. And the urgency is not because it's going to pass next week. It's because we only have a week to make submissions. And the problem with that is, they're trying to shorten the amount of time that you have to submit so that we don't get the same amount of submissions that we did last time. That's why I'm trying to lower the barrier by adding you guys to a petition or getting to the website to make your submission manually. But we do need an element of urgency on this. We can't sit on our hands. We can't. So get behind the effort. We can beat this thing. It's not impossible. And we don't want to be relying on the Greens or the crossbench ever again. So we're going to have to throw everything we can at the next federal election. Gents, I do have to move on because we need to start talking about Anthony Albanese's misinformation and what he's been spreading. He claimed in a 10-second pitch, Mr. Albanese claimed